Okay, thank you for joining in this interview. Each time I interview a world expert in their field, authors and influencers who shape our cultures. Today, it's a great pleasure to have Adam Komisarof, who is a professor in Keio University's Faculty of Letters in Tokyo. He spent 2 sabbaticals at the University of Oxford, first as a visiting academic at the Nissan Institute of Japanese Studies, and then at the Centre on Migration, Policy and Society. Adam has published 3 books, with a fourth forthcoming in January 2025, called The Sage Handbook of Intercultural Communication, with 3 other authors. He's also authored numerous journal articles and book chapters with publishers including Cambridge University Press, Elsevier and Routledge, and served as the editor of 2 special issues for the International Journal of Intercultural Relations. A widely sought public lecturer, Adam has given over 130 invited lectures and paper presentations around the globe. As an intercultural trainer, Adam has performed scores of workshops over the past 27 years for large companies and government organizations in the US, Japan, Southeast Asia, and Europe. Adam is past president and a fellow of the International Academy for Intercultural Research, an academic organisation dedicated to advancing research in intercultural studies and intergroup understanding in the world. Welcome, Adam.
Thank
It's
you,
a
Lydia.
great
Thanks so
honour.
much for having me. It's a great pleasure and also a great honor to be featured here. Thank you so much.
I think the honour is mine. I mean, you have such an accomplished record in your career, and I'm really excited to learn from you today. And just share with me, Adam, what initially drew you to the field of intercultural research, and how has your personal background influenced your journey?
Well, I guess it all began in 1990. I graduated from Brown University in education, and I had never been abroad. The most international trip I had taken when I was young was I walked across the border from the United States to Canada at Niagara Falls, which was maybe a 30-meter journey. So I'd never really been abroad and was fascinated by Japan. So I went to Japan for 2 years. And when I went to Japan, I knew very little about Japanese language, Japanese culture, and had a really good experience there, but certainly made more than my share of mistakes.
Mhm.
So after 2 years in Japan, I returned to America. And one day, when I was living near Seattle, I saw a lecture that was being advertised at the University of Washington from someone named Milton Bennett about something called intercultural communication. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I've got nothing better to do, so I'll go see this. I went to see Milton's lecture, and I really thought at the time that he gave me a vocabulary for explaining all of the differences that I had experienced as an American living in Japan for those 2 years. It gave me a way of kind of just capturing all of these experiences that I could never really describe in words before. And so I really thought, I want to learn more about this. So I decided to take Milton's course at the Summer Institute for Intercultural Communication in Portland, Oregon. And I was pretty much enthralled from the very beginning in terms of the academic content. I also met my Japanese wife at that course. And so that really sealed the deal. And I was in the field of intercultural communication from there.
Oh, that's lovely. It's such a rich background that you've shared, but also bonus to have met your life partner.
Yes, the
Yeah.
biggest bonus. Yes.
And it sounds like the course was really beneficial to you and has led you to your current research, Adam. So just Share with us if you could just elaborate on your current research specialty within intercultural studies and share some key findings or insights that have emerged from your work.
Sure. So I've really done a broad variety of types of research in intercultural communication, whether it's how to design intercultural communication classes, also the methodology of teaching intercultural communication in business, looking specifically at Japanese American cultural differences, ideas about communication style differences between cultures. But right now, I guess I'm focused on two things very intently. One is what I call social markers of acceptance, which is related to national identity. In other words, what are the criteria that people use to decide who is a member of their society? For example, if we were to ask somebody who's American, what makes somebody American? And we asked thousands of people that same question, we might be able to find some patterns in terms of, or themes in terms of what people generally agree on.
Mm-hmm.
Or even maybe not everybody agrees. Maybe there's two or three different kind of paradigms of thought around that question if we ask a lot of Americans. And so I'm looking on one hand at those criteria that people use to decide who's a member of their society, who's
Mm-hmm.
Australian, who's Japanese, and so on. And then I'm also developing a framework of acceptance and belonging in the workplace. So, trying to identify some of the factors that are really, really important for people to feel like they are an accepted, included member in their work organization, especially intercultural organizations where people from different cultures are working with each other regularly. So, those are the two things that I'm really spending a lot of time on these days.
No, that's quite significant in our globalized world. And I think your research really helps us to think through, in terms of national identity, belonging, and in the workplaces, how to be inclusive. So that's really rich research, Adam. Um, how do you believe your research can help improve understanding and interactions among the different cultures? And what practical applications do you see for your findings in today's globalized world?
Well, thanks for asking that, Lydia. I think that the overriding theme here in my work, not only now, but also a great deal in the past, has been about belonging. What does it take to belong into various kinds of groups? What are the criteria people use in making decisions about who can become a member? And then what kind of impact do those processes have on the mentality or psychology of people trying to enter groups? So if you're an immigrant, trying to become part of Japanese society, how does that process impact people's psychological well-being? In terms of the concrete kind of benefits or applications of this research, first of all, I think with the social markers of acceptance, if we can identify what are the criteria that we use to decide who's a member of our group, we can actually then work with people to make those criteria more inclusive.
Mm,
So, for example, looking at immigrants, if we were to say, okay, maybe learning the language of a particular nation is important to become accepted in that society. People could expect, for example, that you speak, read, and write like a native. Okay, like if you're coming to America, you should be as good at English as Americans. If you're coming to Japan, you should be as good at Japanese as Japanese-born people. But that's a very hard standard for people to equal,
mm,
especially people like me who have come to a country as adults. I've been living in Japan mostly since I was 22 years old. And even though I teach in Japanese, I write in Japanese, read in Japanese for my research, I'm not a native, and no one is going to mistake me for a native. Um, but if we take that criteria and then make it a little bit more attainable, for example, people need to be functional in specific situations. For example, functional at work, able to express their needs, in society. These are a kind of criteria that is more inclusive than expecting people to be like a native. Um, and so, once again, the social markers of acceptance, I think, is important in terms of understanding how we decide who becomes a member and then making that more inclusive by maybe making the criteria more flexible. Um, in terms of the workplace belonging research that I'm doing, there's really a lot that's being shown in terms of what's important for people to feel like they're members of their work organization. So, for example, opportunities for leadership roles and job promotions, participation in decision making, being given insider information, feeling trust, support, and respect from one's colleagues are kind of some general, universal elements that are important whenever somebody is trying to feel a part of their company or work organization. But in an intercultural organization, there's another dimension, which is feeling accepted by the other cultural group almost as a provisional member where you're, welcomed in spaces that are different culturally.
Mm.
You're welcomed in spaces where people are speaking a different language. And if people can feel a sense of belonging in this regard too, for example, if I feel like my Japanese colleagues are willing to speak Japanese with me, willing to let me meet customers and give them customer service in Japanese, which shows an expectation of Japanese social norms.
Mm.
That's a kind of added layer, added dimension where people can feel a sense of belonging, especially in intercultural organizations.
Yes, and I can understand how important that is, particularly as belonging and our sense of, where do we belong, and the kinds of questions you're raising and researching are helping us to understand also the issues behind that and how we can communicate and solve these problems. And I understand just from reading about Japan that there is I suppose, a loneliness kind of epidemic in a way, because, yeah, a lot of people are leaving. There are a lot of older generation there. So I think your research does touch on many issues, not only on a national issue, but also the organizational businesses, but helping people understand that these issues are fundamental to a human needs. And I,
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. I agree. I think that in the modern world, that's one of our biggest challenges is finding out ways to belong in a more and more global world society. And that's something that I think many people are looking for. So, how can we create a sense of belonging in our societies for people? How can we create a sense of belonging in our work organizations for people? These are really questions at the heart of what I've been doing for about 30 years.
yeah, no,
So,
that's wonderful.
thank
Um,
you.
so I want to ask you, Adam, as a leading expert in your field, what do you consider to be the most innovative or groundbreaking developments in intercultural research today? And how are these new approaches transforming the field?
Well, I think that without getting too technical, I think that some of the things that are exciting, for example, are access to and ways of analyzing big data. So we're able to really look at a huge amount of information out there and analyze it in ways that were never before possible in human history to try to get, I guess, deeper ideas about how to create better intercultural communication outcomes. What kind of mindsets tend to be helpful in terms of cultural adaptation? What is intercultural competence? We have access to just incredible amounts of data and information, and now have statistical tools we can use to analyze that and hopefully come up with some theories, models that are applicable across many cultures for many people. I guess other really important developments are that we're exploring new forms of diversity, intersectionality. And so, really, what we're seeing in the intercultural field is more and more people all around the world doing research, which is a kind of diversity, about more and more types of diversity around the world, whether it's ethnic diversity, religious diversity, regional diversity, many, many kinds of diversity, and then intersectionality. So when people are non-dominant group members from more than one group. For example, maybe they're, a woman of color who's, a woman of color, for example, might have both challenges in terms of gender discrimination as well as racial discrimination. And how do those experiences inform their kind of broader experiences in the world and affect their ability to belong in their work organizations or societies. So I think that the field is more diverse than ever in terms of people doing research. And then also we're looking at more and more types of diversity, which is going to help more and more types of people around the world, I think.
No, that's so helpful, Adam. Thank you for sharing that. And such needed research as our world, today is so diverse and globalized. And I just want to ask you, Adam, what are your top 3 tips for becoming an effective intercultural communicator?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this. I think one thing that's very, very important is just having fun, being curious, enjoying the process of intercultural communication. Because if you're enjoying it, the people around you will enjoy communicating with you, and you will build good relationships with people most of the time. I think another very important point is being a very good listener and a very good observer. You can learn so much about the culture around you by just watching and listening. Um, just to give a brief example, when I first came to Japan in 1990, I was on a trip, on a day trip, I think to go hiking. I had gotten on a train and I was getting pretty hungry. So I thought, I'll have a little snack before lunch and pulled out something to snack on in the train. But before I started eating, I looked around the train and I realized nobody else on this train is eating. And since I came to Japan a month ago, I haven't seen anybody eating on the train. And so just by making that connection, I was able to realize, oh, in Japan, actually, it's frowned upon if you eat on a kind of regular local train. The bullet trains are another story. They're made for that kind of thing. But, was able to kind of pick up on that social norm. So I think being a good listener and observer is important. And then finally, I think seeing the perspective of others, especially when they're different from yours, as representing information that you need to understand to solve conflicts with that person. In other words, having what some people call learning conversations. So instead of seeing the other person's opinion as something to fight against, instead of seeing that person's opinion as something to obey without thinking, really trying to think, what can you tell me about your perspective, which maybe will help me to learn something I don't know that will help us to figure this problem out together, is a really important mindset to have. So I think when you do that, the other person can sense that you're really interested in what they have to say, despite the fact that you do have differences. And people are able to kind of work out problems and differences of opinion that maybe they wouldn't be able to if they took on other approaches.
Well, I love your 3 tips, Adam. That's so helpful. And I think, we've greatly benefited from your expertise today. Just so much to think about. And I think the next time I, cross to another country or even in Melbourne, cross to another culture, I'll certainly be able to think of those 3 tips in mind and apply them. So thank you again. I appreciate your time and your expertise. And thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. It's been a real pleasure.